to another one of my Leetcode videos. In this one we'll do 2501, which is longest square streak in an array. So what this is, you're given an array and you have to find the subsequence which when sorted is a square streak. So for example, in this array we have 2, 4 and 16, which are like, if you put them in order, they're going to be 2, and then 2 squared is 4, 4 squared is 16. So the size of this streak is 3, and there's no other streak longer than this in the array, so we return 3. And if there is no streak of squares, for example here, there is no square streak, so we return -1, right? So there should be at least 2 squares in the subsequence for it to be considered a square streak. If you notice here that it's pretty challenging to think about an approach here, and especially if they're in random order, right? Like even if you start with 4, you might find 16, but then what if 16 was down the line and there's like 64 in between, or 2 somewhere else? So it's very hard to do this if the elements are like in random order. So the first thing that came to mind is we should probably sort this so that at least we know that the array can only get bigger and you won't miss out on any squares as you traverse the array, right? So once we sort the array, then it becomes a bit easier, because let's take the first example. The sorted array would look like, so the sorted array would look like this, and here you can see that we can traverse this array. If we see 2, we see 3, we see 4, we know that we saw 2 before, so we can like increment our streak if we find its square root previously, right? And then as we move forward, let's say we found 16, we know that previously we found its square root 4, and for 4 there was a streak of 2. So if we keep track of the streaks, right, so 2, we haven't seen its square root before, and it's not even an integer, so we just default to 1. 3, we haven't seen it before, so same thing. 4, we've seen the square root before, which is 2, and we see that there's a count of 1 against it, so we put 2. And then 6 and 8 we haven't seen before, so they're just both 1. And then for 16, we have seen its square root 4 before, and the streak was 2, so we put it at 3. Now in this case, we just keep track of the streaks we're having, and at the end, the maximum streak that we found along the way will be our answer. But one thing here is that we need to take the square root, which can be a bit expensive. So the approach I came up with is if you go in reverse. So if you go for 16 first, so let's try to write that down here. So if you go for 16 first, this you'll find is 1, and then you go to 8, it will be 1 because you haven't seen it before. You go to 6, it's 1, and then when you go to 4, what our check actually here will be whether you've seen the square of this number, right? 16, we haven't seen 256. For 8, we haven't seen 64. For 6, we haven't seen 36. But for 4, we have seen 16. So we increment it, we make it 2 over here. And then for 3, we haven't seen 9, so it's just 1. And then for 2, we have seen 4. We have seen its square, 4, which is 2. So we increment it at 3. And so, as we calculate these streaks, we keep track of the maximum, and then that will be our final answer. So let's get into the coding. So the first thing we'll do is sort the array. Once the array is sorted, we will need a map of number to the streak, and then we will traverse the array in reverse. So this is the algorithm to traverse the array in reverse. And then it'll basically be, if we've seen this number before, then we just add that number plus 1. Actually, it's not if we've seen the number before. If we've seen the square of the number before, right, then what we put for the current number is we get, let's save the square in a variable. So if we've seen the square before, then we get the square and add 1, and that's our streak. And then as we do this, we need to keep track of our max, right? So we start by saying max is -1 because that's our default max. And then we'll say max equals math.math and our new value, right? Otherwise, we just put a value of 1 for the current number, right? So if we haven't seen the square before, we just put a value of 1 for it. And this should be nums to streak over here. Okay, and then we return the max. So let's see how this does. Yep, this should be contains key. It's misspelled. Be I minus minus. Cool, accepted. Let's submit. Great, accepted. 100% time and memory. So thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.